think the presidency is having a really profound impact on the region, and in a sense I think that many of the regional leaders, including probably many politicians here in Australia, haven't come to terms with how great the magnitude of the change is. I think in a sense we're seeing a lot of political leaders and others almost being in a state of denial, in the sense that there was a lot of concern before Trump came to power that he might be a very erratic leader. Once he came to power, I think a lot of people hoped that his advisors would keep his policy in check and that his administration would be mostly domestic focused. Now I think just really, particularly in the last few weeks, we've seen that he is very externally focused and capable of making very snap decisions which can have huge consequences. So I think the potential consequences for our region are very serious, and that our political leaders here in Australia need to be thinking what we can be doing to try to calm the situation and make sure that nothing too drastic happens. It's always difficult to read North Korea, of course. In part it's a reaction to the presence of a new president in the US. North Korea tends to do this when new presidents come to power. It's part of a process in a way of waving their arms around, trying to attract attention. What the North Korean regime has wanted for a very long time is for the United States to sit down at the negotiating table with the North Korean government. And whenever a president comes to power, it seems that they do things to attract attention in the hope that they will bring that result about. But of course, this time, as has happened before, what they've actually done is to ramp up the tensions and to make dialogue more unlikely. But the other thing that I think we can potentially read into what North Korea has been doing in recent months is signs of a regime in a real state of tension and anxiety, possibly a sense of insecurity in the North Korean regime rather than a sense of, being powerful and wanting to project their might. I think it's absolutely essential that the Trump regime, the Trump administration, keeps calm and doesn't provoke further tensions in the region. But I don't think we can be at all sure that that's going to happen. In recent weeks, we've had the strike on Syria, a drastic change in US policy, particularly in relation to Russia. And more recently, moves in the direction of North Korea, wanting to try to put pressure on the North Koreans to change their approach. All of this is very unsettling, and I think the really important thing that everybody needs to keep in mind is that if there were a military clash on the Korean Peninsula, either because of an actual strike by the US or because maybe US exercises came into some accidental conflict with North Korean troops, that would be a catastrophe. It would be a catastrophe on a scale that I don't think we've seen in our region since the Second World War or maybe the Korean War. There are many estimates that, if there were actually armed conflict on the Korean Peninsula, that would leave millions of people dead. So I don't think we can be confident that the conflict will be avoided, and I think it's really urgent that the governments of the region should come together and start talking about how they're going to de-escalate the conflict, how they're going to deal with the issue. I don't think it's enough for the other countries of the region simply to turn to China and say, do something about it, because China is obviously very concerned about what's happening in the region as well, but it has limited influence over North Korea. So there's a real need for some leadership in Australia and around the region to bring the region together into dialogue and to avoid a conflict. For Australia, I think rising tensions, and particularly, the possibility of an actual armed conflict to our north, is enormously serious. I just feel somehow that the media and our political leaders maybe haven't grasped the seriousness of the situation. An armed conflict in Korea, apart from being a humanitarian disaster, would also undoubtedly create a very serious level of conflict between the US and China. And for Australia, for our major ally, our major strategic partner, to be in conflict with our major trading partner is obviously something that has very serious consequences. But also simply the humanitarian consequences of moving into a situation of actual military conflict of any sort would be terrible for Australia.